If you like the wide open spaces, if you want to get away from it all, well, this is the place to be, in the middle of the Northern Territory of Australia. This highway here, the bitumen as they call it, links Alice Springs in the centre of Australia, 600 miles that way, with Darwin on the north coast, which is 400 miles that way. And in the entire 1,000 miles of highway, which is longer than the length of the entire British Isles, there are perhaps 3 or 4 settlements that can compare in size with a large English village. In between, a few hamlets consisting of no more than the petrol pump, a store, and a place to sleep. That's lonely enough, but if you really want to be lonely, then turn off the bitumen down a road like this. Down here, you travel for 250 miles, and you see nothing. No settlement, no store, no house, no human being, not even a source of fresh water. If you break down, you don't go and walk for help because there's nowhere to walk to and you would die of thirst. No, you just settle down beside your car and prepare for a long wait until a car may come by, perhaps a week, and you prepare too to drink the water of your radiator. We set off down this road a fortnight ago, and we took with us an extra 5 gallons of oil, 20 gallons of petrol, 25 gallons of water, and food for a week. The road is flat and straight. You can drive for 20 miles without having to move the wheel more than a few inches. The worst hazard is dust. A fine talc-like powder lies over the road in drifts so deep that it conceals boulders and potholes big enough to break an axle. It swirls behind you and filters into the car, covering everything. It sticks in your hair and clogs your eyes and your mouth. It was unpleasant, but not as unpleasant as the thought that if the car broke down and we couldn't repair it, we would be marooned in this wilderness for days and maybe weeks until a passing car could take a message for help. After 250 miles of emptiness, this was the first building we saw. This is Borroloola Hotel. Once, there was enough room here for 20 guests. Perhaps the accommodation, even at its best, was never very comfortable, but at least they would have got shade from the sun and shelter from the dust storms. A horseman reaching Borroloola might have traveled for days with little to moisten his mouth but tepid water from a waterhole green with scum. Here, he could have got a decent drink. Here, once, he would have found company after days without seeing another human face. Now, the only sound is the wind creaking in the corrugated iron roof. A wind that has already blown down much of the place. From the look of it, another gale will be sufficient to demolish the whole rickety construction. 50 years ago, Borroloola was quite a large settlement, a base from which prospectors and cattlemen set off into the largely unexplored Northern Territory. It stood on the banks of the MacArthur River, up which sailed ships laden with stores, having made the 1,000-mile voyage round the coast from Darwin. Pioneering cattlemen, bringing up herds to establish new stations in the territory, came through Borroloola because there was good fresh water by the river. Here, the drovers stopped and drank the hotel dry. If there was a white flag flying above the pub, then all the drinks were free, for it meant that one of Borroloola's citizens had become a father. At the turn of the century, Borroloola had 2 hotels, 5 stores, and a permanent population of over 50 Europeans. Even more remarkable, there was a library here of nearly 3,000 books. The government sent up surveyors to lay out squares and terraces and divide the desert into building plots. Borroloola seemed certain to grow into a big and prosperous town. But somehow, for some reason, it never happened. Out in the desert, boreholes were drilled for water, and it was no longer essential for the cattle to come by way of Borroloola. New roads were driven through the parched bush, and traffic up the river dwindled. The ox wagons, waiting at Borroloola to take the ship's cargoes and haul them out to the cattle stations, waited in vain. One by one, they rotted until nothing remained of them but the iron hoops of their wheels. In the 1920s and 30s, a few cars came roaring and rattling across the desert, driven by enterprising prospectors. Some managed to return to civilization, but others coughed their way as far as Borroloola and then stopped for good. There was no one here to tackle a major repair. Already, business at the hotel had shriveled to almost nothing. White ants chewed their way through the entire library. Only one volume survives, The Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis. Its title page is still easily legible, but inside the termites have eaten most of the holy man's words. Although gold had been found close by, the claim petered out and the machinery, brought in with enormous labor to sort the ore, was abandoned to rust. Up in the hot hills, the last of the full-time prospectors, sitting alone, shot himself. Life ebbed away from Borroloola, but it never entirely left it. For some, the town was more attractive as a dead shell than it would have been had it grown and flourished. The last keeper of the hotel never left it. He's an Irishman, and his name is Jack Mulholland. Jack, what brought you first to Borroloola?
I heard it was a good place, nice country. Plenty of water holes and springs and ducks and geese. Nice climate.
And did you settle down in the place then?
No. I stopped one wet here. Joined the library up here and put in about 3 or 4 months reading.
Did you? What did you read?
All those books in the library. Oh, not them all, but quite a few of them.
What sort of thing?
Oh, well, they had a complete set, almost a complete set of W. Jacobs, and I like Jacobs.
Oh, yeah?
And I read all those.
Yeah. What else?
And also, various other books. I've forgotten them now. I remember reading one medical book.
Did you?
And after I'd read the medical book, I reckon I suffered with every disease known to man. I liked the place while I was here. And then I had this offer to manage this public house here, yeah, which I did. I took it up and come over this way.
Is that a full-time job?
Well, yes, you had to be here all the time.
Yeah, but I mean, was it a busy job?
Oh, definitely no. You could, plenty of time to sleep, plenty of time to read, plenty of time to eat.
How many guests do you reckon you'd get at any one time?
At one time? Oh, never more than one, and I don't think there'd be more than about 4 or 5 all the time I've been here, while it was a hotel.
What do you mean at any one time? Or 4 or 5 guests at all?
At all.
What, total?
Total.
No wonder it closed. Jack, what do you reckon keeps a man in this country? It must be a pretty lonely sort of life.
Oh, no, that all depends. I've never been lonely in my life. There's always been so much in life. I could never honestly say I was lonely. I've lived for years on my own, in the desert. Haven't seen anyone for months, but I've never been lonely. The trees are company, and the birds, and all the rest of it.
You've made a lot of sacrifices to live here. Which one would you like to take back, as it were?
Well, I can't honestly think of any sacrifice that I regret making. No, I honestly can't think.
You must miss people.
Oh, no, I don't miss people. Oh, no.
Or the company of drinking companions or beautiful women.
No, I don't miss beautiful women. Women never made much impression on me.
No?
No.
What's wrong with them?
Oh, I consider they're very deceitful, they're liars, and they're totally without principle whatsoever. But they're lovely to look at. I admire them, and I like looking at them.
It sounds as though you might have come out here for the classical reason of an unhappy encounter with a beautiful woman, Jack.
Oh, no, definitely no.
You just never had any use for them?
Oh, I wouldn't say I wouldn't have any use for them. Oh, no, I like them very much. But as far as devoting my life to any particular woman, no, definitely no.
Jack, how do you fill your days?
Well, most of the time I'm in the bush, got an old truck there. I make periodic visits out into the scrub, prospecting and...
Prospecting?
Mm.
What are you looking for?
Well, I'm supposed to be looking for copper or gold, silver lead or something like that, but I'm looking for contentment mostly.
For contentment?
Yeah. Of course, the prospector wouldn't admit that, but most of them are doing just that very thing, looking for contentment.
Do they find it?
I think they do.
Do you find it?
I find it, yes.
Yeah.
I'm still the same as I was when I was 25. I like to see what's over the next hill.
Yeah. And that's a reward for life in itself?
I consider it is, yes.
Yeah. Have you ever found any diamonds or gold or...?
Oh, yes, I've found a little bit. I've found a little bit of opal, a little bit of gold, found copper.
You ever exploited it?
No, I've sent samples away, parcels away, but never did any good, which is typical of most prospectors.
Well, isn't that pretty disappointing?
Oh, no. No, it would break a man's heart if he did discover anything. What would there be to live for? Nothing.
Truly?
Well, there's nothing in life. If you have a lot of money, what's good money to you?
Well, it can make life comfortable, easy.
Yes, well, what are you going to do? Drink it? Give it away to women? Something like that? Buy a few motor cars? A yacht or two or something like that? No, I can see nothing in that.
You must have a need for some money. What do you do?
Yes, you have to. This life makes it necessary to have a few pound. Well, I get it where I can. Scalping dogs and crocodile hides and...
But that way you get enough pounds to sort of buy, what, flour?
Flour and tobacco are the main things. Flour, tea, sugar, tobacco, that's the main things. Ammunition, of course.
Yeah. But you don't work over hard at it.
Oh, I work more the way I'm living now. I work harder than the present day a fellow in this country works to get his 25 and 30 pound a week.
You spend a fair amount of time sitting and thinking, don't you, Jack?
Oh, I do a lot of thinking at times, but when you've got to walk 20 miles a day prospecting, and that's work.
Would you describe yourself as a happy, contented man?
I should say so. The gods have been very good to me.
Yeah.
I consider myself a remarkable fella.
Why remarkable?
Well, I'm reasonably happy and contented.
Yeah? Well, there are not many people who can sit down and say that they're happy and contented.
Oh, yes, well, of course, there's a screw loose somewhere.
Yeah.
Definitely a screw loose.
Jack's old truck is a 1928 model. When we first saw it, there was a large nest of white ants in the middle of the engine. But Jack assured us that it was only a moment's work to get it into running order. It had no electric starter, nor even a crank handle. But Jack had his own method of starting it. The rear axle has been jacked up and the engine is in gear. To have suggested to Jack that it might not go would have been extremely tactless and have offended him deeply. But I must admit, I had my doubts.
Really? Really, but not quite.
Jack rather prides himself on making his own roads. And when the engine is going sweetly, he never misses an opportunity of knocking down a few trees to improve one of his tracks. People in the territory say that Jack and his like are mad. They call them hatters or no-hopers. But he's not the only one in Borroloola. Two others live around the decaying remains of the town. One of them has built himself a cabin some 5 miles away from Jack's hotel by the side of a small lagoon. He's known as the Mad Fiddler. He sits for weeks on end without leaving his tiny cabin, playing his violin. He refuses to be photographed. He's even been known to threaten unexpected visitors with a shotgun. Every few months, he drives out to a store in an ancient car to collect flour and tea and tobacco, but his visits are as short and as infrequent as he can make them. There's a story in the territory that he is the titled son of an English aristocratic family. 40 years ago, he told us, he had been an actor in the theatres of the north of England. And when I asked him why he had left, he replied, "I got out of England for England's good." Now, he seeks no company except the birds that haunt his lagoon. A man's riches, he said to us, are the fewness of his wants. I find all I want in the country around me. The last of the hermits of Borroloola is its oldest inhabitant, Roger Jose. No one knows how old he is, and Roger himself has been claiming that he's 68 for at least the last 5 years. With him lives Biddy, his wife, who catches fish for him in the river and cooks his meals. Every morning, he fetches water and chops wood so that he can have a fire to keep himself warm during the cold nights. His hat was made for him to his own design by Biddy out of the leaves of the pandanus trees that grow nearby. His house is extremely odd. A circular construction of corrugated iron with no windows and only a small opening cut in its side to serve as a door. It must be suffocatingly hot during the heat of the day, but then Roger spends most of his time outside, sitting down by the wall of his extraordinary house, thinking. Roger, this is a rather curious house. What exactly is it?
It's a tank, a conservation of rainwater.
How many gallons did it hold?
5,000, I think. You know.
Where was this tank originally?
Up there, you can see the base of it now.
What, by the hotel?
Yes, under that mango tree.
Well, what made you shift it?
Well, it was crippled, it got badly crippled, and it was no longer in use. You can see where it's been patched. Oh, you see patches stuck onto it in all sorts of cruel manners. And I could make a good dwelling, so I got it off Jackie and brought it down here.
When did you first come to Borroloola?
About a little later than this, about this time in the storm time.
But which year?
1916.
Long time ago.
What is that? 46 years or so.
You're a man who likes solitude, I imagine.
Oh, indeed I do. Like, I don't know if it's vanity, I'm very fond of my own company. I never feel lonely.
Never?
No, well, that would hardly be honest, because I've mostly always had a mate, a female, like and prior to that, I lived in civilization. I got married about 30. Well, I hadn't developed this superiority complex, you know. I found out that I couldn't get any better company than my own by then, you know. Yeah. And I'd already learned enough off my fellows, savvy? Oh, goodness, yeah.
So you came out for the wilderness?
In a sense, but I'm at bay in a sense. I'm here. This is as far as I can travel.
A lot of people, I suppose, would find this loneliness unendurable, Roger, for a long period of time.
True enough. Oh, that's obvious. It's overpowering with some men.
It would overpower them.
It is overpowering, but I doubt it would ever overpower me. But like I said, I'm not an example of complete loneliness, eh?
Yeah.
Old Biddy, although she's primitive and all that, company. Yes, and the sort I like, she won't argue the point with me. And moreover, not a bit interested in what I've got to say. And
Are you seeking loneliness?
no, not loneliness. I want you to understand I'm not a bit lonely.
You're not.
No, oh goodness, no. If you said isolation, well, that'd be slightly different. Yeah, I could say yes. I'm fond of isolation, but I couldn't really talk of loneliness because I don't know what it is. But I gather that some men it's overpowering. Yes. Talk to a stump or anything, eh? Well, I suppose I would in a way.
Do you
In
talk?
fact,
Do you talk to the birds?
oh yes, and talk to myself too.
Do you?
Yes, quite often.
You get the best answers that way.
Yes, it improves my mental state too, talking to an intelligent man. Yes. Oh yes, it.
There was a library here at Borroloola, wasn't there? What sort of things do you read?
What? Nearly anything. Read the labels on jam tins. Yes, really, I'm a good reader once I start.
But it's rather an odd place to have a library, Borroloola, isn't it?
Because
Borroloola is not the first place you'd think of as having a library.
indeed, no.
Was it a big library?
Well, like I told you the other day, there were at least 2,900 books in it. There may have been more. I got a job rearranging them once, and I distinctly remember 2,900.
Who are your favourite authors, Roger?
First and foremost, I would put Gray.
Thomas Gray.
Was that his name?
What, Gray's Elegy, man?
Yes, well, that'll just tell you how much I know. What was his name? But I mean Gray, the author of Gray's Elegy, or the Lincolnshire poet. I forget when he died.
And who else?
Oh, well, I would put him first and foremost. You must understand I can only read English, like. Yes, that's all. But I don't want to read anything else. In a way, I would like to read anything that was better than Gray's Elegy. I would. And Shakespeare, of course.
You sound particularly fond of poetry.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, indeed I am.
Have you written much yourself?
Oh, a good bit, but you know what I mean. Strange to say, poetry was never. You ever hear of it? Never be in favour, was it? Eh? Oh, people bought it, but I don't think that any poets ever made a fortune out of it.
Can you recite any of your own poetry?
Come to think of it, yes, one is not inconveniently long. Strange to say, it's got no title. But would you like to hear it?
I would.
Wouldn't bore you.
No.
Well, I'll tell you about it. You can get a bit of a sideline on how I come to write such a weird poem. There was one of the old timers about here called Gaunt, Charlie Gaunt. And he was well up in the, must have been towards 70. He got a bug to write about the early days, raiding the blacks, you know, and shooting them up. Well, I wrote once, I remember writing this. Here, doddering in senile decay, my memory harks blithely away to pink dawns when I'd creep on blacks fast asleep and knock 'em hell west and all of a heap. A bravo just hired to slay. That their weapons could scarcely compare didn't cause me much care, nor the fact that they slept while sheer murder crept, by red embers guided, and no sentinel kept them apprised of the sinister shapes lurking there. And any who were prone to declare this one-sided fight wasn't fair should have seen the bold bids made by women and kids, whom we slew for the benefit of opulent yids, reclining in far Belgrave Square. That'd be a joke if I've got that wrong. Is that a residential area?
Yes, that's all
Okay.
right.
Posh,
Belgrave Square is a
good,
residential area.
I couldn't afford to stop, you know. Reclining in fair Belgrave Square. Yeah, well,
Roger, it would seem that living out here, your life really couldn't be more simple. What do you live on, for example? What do you eat?
well, I live on the simplest kinds of food per force. I would fain eat a bit more of the master's oxen, but I can't get them. Live mainly on tinned beef, damper, not so bad.
That damper is flour and water for
Yeah,
fries.
and baking powder.
And baking powder.
Might as well be without the baking powder. And I could go out and slay a marsupial or one of master's...
Slay a marsupial?
Yeah.
You mean knock off a roo?
Beg yours? Knock
mean-
off a roo, yes, that's to put it in the best Australian drawing room, the best drawing room Australia, yeah.
Would you regard yourself as a philosophic man?
Oh, yes. Like, I would interpret this way for my convenience then. I surely love wisdom and learning. Goodness, yeah. Above all things.
What do you regard as the greatest reward that comes from living this rather harsh life? Harsh and lonely out here in Borroloola.
People wouldn't understand. I think one of the great advantages about living here, I've been accused of thinking too much, like if you could think too much, eh? What is a man frightened of? That he'll uncover things in his thought or what? But keen sense of values of what really matters.
And what does matter?
Peace. And, yeah, peace, I suppose. And nearness, like you mightn't believe this, you might think I'm piling it on. But I'm a very religious man, you know. And this, you said, do I feel lonely? Oh, why should I feel lonely? With God and men like the immortal Bill and Gray and old Omar. Why should I feel lonely?